Okay, I guess it's working. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I hope that you are having fun today. Welcome to our event. Can everyone hear me now? This is the first time that I'm using this device, so it feels a bit weird, but also super fun. Okay, great. So today we have something very important to share with all of you. This event is called Listen to Us, a global youth statement on nature-based solutions. And nature-based solutions, they have gained a lot of attention lately, and they are very promising. And the narrative around this is that it's very promising both for climate and biodiversity solutions, as well for including communities. And just today, Canada announced that 30% of its climate finance is gonna finance nature-based solutions, 20%, sorry. But this proves that nature-based solutions are strong and they are here to stay. Meanwhile, many voices, they may not be completely included in this process, including the voices of youth. And this is why today we are very happy to introduce you to this global statement. So I'm gonna now give the floor to my colleagues, and they're gonna talk a little bit more about this project.
Hello. Oh, hello. Okay. Wow, weird. I think first we're going to introduce ourselves and the organizations that we're coming from. I'm also wondering if we can get our virtual speakers up on the stage because we have two. Oh, hello, Myrna. We can all see you. Amazing. Oh, that's so wonderful. Okay. And then will we have our virtual speakers right beside the slides? So then can we also see the slides on the other side? Maybe.
I hope you can hear me, guys. Can you?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yay. Okay.
Okay. We're testing some of the technology. This is fun. Maybe I'll just start by sharing that this Global Youth Statement project is something that came about from a coalition of us working together. Oh, wonderful. From a coalition of organizations, of youth-led organizations working together. So we wanted to briefly introduce ourselves first. And if we go to the next slide, we'll start with Abraham talking about Yango. Here you go.
Thank you, everyone. Grateful to see all of you sitting here and actually listening to us as we have actually asked you to. My name is Abraham Bugri. I'm from Ghana. And I am a climate change researcher and activist, currently doing my PhD in climate change, focusing on women in agriculture in northern part of Ghana, which is heavily impacted by climate change. But I'm also part of the UNFCCC youth constituency, normally called Yango. And this actually is a project, a combination or a collaboration actually between Youth for Nature, Gibbon and Yango. So I am from Yango, and Yango is actually, like I said, the official youth constituency for the UNFCCC. I think after the 2015 climate COP, the presence of the youth and the zeal of the youth, and then the call of the youth to be part of negotiations became very strong, and that is when we had conversations with the UNFCCC, and we were actually made, an official constituency. So we normally try to put together young people in what we call the Conference of Youth every year, just a week before this event, that's a COP, to try and put together a global youth statement to present to COP as in our position and how we can influence, climate change decisions. So yes, that is who we are, and I would pass it on to.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Hola. I'm from Mexico. My name is Grecia Bárcena, and I am part of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, which is the youth constituency for the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is also part of the Rio Conventions. And we are a network all over around the world. We organize ourselves at global level, but also at national level, having national chapters where we all try to halt the loss of biodiversity through different types of activities, mostly focused on the ground, but we also do policy advocacy towards things that we really matter about this, like regarding biodiversity, and of course, a lot of collaboration with our other partners so we can enhance our voice as youth. Yeah.
Excellent. Hey, hello, everybody. My name is Marina. I'm representing today the Youth for Nature. I'm the founder of Youth for Nature. Youth for Nature is a youth-led international nonprofit organization that is working directly at the intersections of nature and climate. And we're mobilizing young people around the world to really lead on solutions to both nature and climate together in ways that are grounded in knowledge, in community, and in justice. So one of the sort of things that brought us together as an organization was this feeling that the nature conversation and the climate conversation were really happening in separate rooms when we felt like they really needed to be happening together, because this is, of course, like an interconnected, interlinked a series of crises that are influencing each other and feedbacking off each other. And we also felt like young people weren't really being involved in this kind of intersection of conversations either. So we really wanted to kind of fill that gap, and working with organizations or constituencies, I should say, like Youngo and Gibbon are one of the ways that we do that.
Thank you, Marina. Thank you, everyone, for the introduction. I would like to say that I haven't introduced myself, which is a bit weird as the moderator of this event. So basically, I'm just a ghost right now. So just for you to get to know a little bit more about myself, I'm Raiza, and I'm the Regional Director for Europe and Central Asia at Youth for Nature. And I'm from Belo Horizonte, Brazil, but I'm very grateful to call Finland my home for the past 2 years. And I love dogs. I just love dogs so much. This is maybe a funny fact about me. And now we are going to move on to maybe explain a little bit more about our project and why this is needed and why it's so significant. So beyond Canada's plans of financing nature-based solutions or all these big international narratives, we want to know why we need to elevate the youth perspectives and expertise in this. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll briefly give a little bit of context about why we're here today, like why a global youth position statement on nature-based solutions. NBS, nature-based solutions, has been growing in popularity really, really quickly over the last couple of years. More and more folks are getting on board in this conversation. And there's a lot of really positive things about that, but there are also a lot of really valid and important and critical concerns about the way that the nature-based solutions conversation is going, and the folks that are being involved, and more importantly, the folks that are not being involved in the conversation. And we really felt that young people especially were not really being included in these discussions. This NBS movement was growing faster and faster, and there was a lack of a youth, especially a collective youth voice. And we saw a couple of gaps there that we wanted to address. And Youth for Nature, as an organization that really works at these intersections, saw a really natural opportunity to engage in this discussion. But we felt like there was something missing, and we needed to bring more young people in, and we knew that we couldn't do this alone, which is why this coalition came to be. So what we ended up doing is we wanted to put together this global youth statement, and we wanted to do this in a way that was inclusive as possible and bringing in as many youth voices, not just from like the staff members or the direct volunteers of our 3 groups, but bringing together larger youth communities that we represent and are also a part of. But we couldn't just do that without first giving young people resources to even really understand, like, okay, what are nature-based solutions? What is the conversation about? How are people talking about it? What are the various strengths or things that people are excited about when they talk about nature-based solutions? And what are the really important concerns and critiques that folks are bringing up when they're talking about nature-based solutions? Because it wouldn't be fair, it wouldn't make sense to ask a young person what their thoughts were, what their perspectives were about nature-based solutions without them having ever heard the term maybe, or feeling like they had access to resources to really understand the concept and make a really informed, to make an informed decision or have an informed perspective on the topic. So we started by putting together a nature-based solutions information brief that we worked together collectively on. It meant to be a really accessible, relatively short resource document that wasn't providing a perspective or like a position on nature-based solutions, but was rather collecting information and presenting it directly intended for young people so that young people can get up to speed and sort of understand what the context is. And we launched that at the IUCN Global Youth Summit, which was in April earlier this year. And that's been up ever since. And then once that was up and we had a discussion at the Global Youth Summit where we presented the info brief, and then we also hosted a dialogue of folks on various sort of ends of the nature-based solution discussion spectrum to bring young people up to speed and give those resources to young people. And then after that, we launched our survey.
Yeah, so the survey was basically, we asked about 1,000 young people all over around the world, and they were able to ask, answer things on what they understand as nature-based solutions, what they were looking for, do they really think there was any safeguards around the term, how are we using it? So together with this survey, we launched the statement, which we actually will be presenting to you right now, and we are now here presenting the whole information to you. Actually, on addition to the brief, I think honestly it's really well written. It's very easy to understand, and even if you're not an expert on it, seriously, you're gonna be able to understand everything about it. And it's not also showcasing one point of view, it's showcasing different points of view and which kind of guidelines should be following. So yeah.
I'll also note that we launched the survey in 3 languages, so it was in English, Spanish, and French. And that survey, I think, has been out for 6 months, 7 months. So it's been out for quite a while. And then the statement is a result of the collective responses to that survey.
What I love about this project is that you are not just collecting impressions of people, but you are also bridging this important gap regarding knowledge. And I think this is something very relevant in the climate and conservation movements in general, that many times we want to be part of it, but we just don't really know the vocabulary, the concepts. So I think that this is really great. So now we will move on to release the statement, finally, which is super great. And I will invite to the floor Julia, who is joining us online. Yay! Hey, Julia!
Hello,
hey,
can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, it's double now? No, that's mine.
You are muted now.
No, it should be better. No?
Okay, it's working.
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm super happy to be with you all today. Before releasing, I just want to flag how the huge work everybody is doing and everyone that has been involved in it. And I want to flag that this work has been mostly on volunteering basis. All the youth involved here that are in the audience, that are on the stage watching us from the video, have been giving hours beside their daily jobs, beside their university thesis, exam stress, etc., on voluntary basis. And I really want to flag that this is a state of use right now, that we have to fight for what is right for us, but unpaid, unfunded. And I want really you to understand that this is a huge work we're doing right now without much resources. So please acknowledge that. And I also want to thank the Nature for Climate team and the Nature Pavilion team for providing us with a really great platform without much tokenism and with letting us do whatever we want with this lot, which we can't thank you enough for that. So really. So now let's go directly into the survey statement. That's the time. As Marina and Grisha were saying, we surveyed more than 1,000 youth from 118 countries from all around the world. It was really key that we reach as much youth as possible from as much diversity as possible, as long as an online survey would allow us. We are really aware that not rural people are here represented, but we expect that the fact that we were both in French, Spanish, and English allow us to represent as much as the youth communities around the world think about nature-based solutions. We are happy that we are roughly gender balanced and that most respondents are truly under 30 years old. Sorry, just a bit confused. Most of our respondents, for you to understand, have a strong to medium understanding of nature-based solutions. And to sum up in one sentence, what they think about nature-based solutions is that they see the potential and they're even excited about what nature-based solutions can bring about the nature and climate issues. But at the same time, the same time, they're really concerned about the current narrative on nature-based solutions, especially when they're seeing all the greenwashing practices right now on nature, climate, and using these so-called nature-based solutions to go more into greenwashing and not take their own responsibilities. What youth perceive as the dominant narrative is an overemphasis on carbon sequestration and offsettings, and not enough emphasis on the biodiversity conservation and ecosystem integrity and function sides of nature-based solutions. In our statement, we have 8 key messages. These messages are: first, nature-based solutions is not a new term it's not a new term, it's an old idea that has been understood and practiced for millennia, especially by local communities and indigenous people. This term is also vulnerable to greenwashing that could promote monoculture plantations, commodification of nature, land grabbing, and other impacts on human rights, especially indigenous people and local communities. And nature-based solutions must not be an excuse to delay any decarbonization of our economy that is hugely needed and quickly. It is critical that mechanisms be put in place to eliminate all these risks. One of the most dominant narratives, as I told you, is that carbon sequestration through carbon offsetting schemes is really overemphasized without letting much biodiversity conservation benefits and human justice being overheard and emphasized in nature-based solutions. And for nature-based solutions to be truly effective, local biodiversity conservation must be prioritized, as well as ecosystem integrity, ecosystem functions, and it must be grounded in justice, equity, and inclusion. We have 2 big recommendations regarding nature-based solutions. If nature-based solutions are to be featured in policies, which seems to be the tendency right now as we're seeing it at the UNFCCC and the CBD conventions, then we need a legally agreed framework that is recognized and upheld by both the CBD and the UNFCCC to prevent any misuse and misinterpretation, and centering community leadership, ecosystem integrity, rights-based approaches, and justice. Another recommendation we have is that nature-based solution implementation must follow strict binding social and environmental safeguards, with a focus on ecosystem integrity and functions, meaningful participation, and free, prior, and informed consent from indigenous people and local communities, human and indigenous rights, and rights of nature. All this must be grounded, again, in justice, equity, and inclusion. This is really what Hughes highlighted us in our survey. The last recommendation, last message we have is that young people will not tolerate anymore polluters and decision makers to co-opt and misuse nature-based solutions to evade their responsibilities. We really commit to calling out co-option and false solutions. So that's the big summary of our statement. And now we will take the time we have to go deeper in 3 big topics. I let Reza explain to us and the audience what we're going to talk later during this session.
Thank you, Julia. This is an amazing summary. This was a lot to unpack, and you did it extremely well, and I'm so happy to hear this. And as you can see, youth is not only calling out on bad practices, but also offering solutions. So this is so great. We are great, young people. So this is really great. Thanks a lot for this nice statement. So now we are going to move to the discussion part. Which is usually, for me, very exciting for all the interaction that we are going to have. And you will also be able to ask questions, and we can have more of a conversation with the audience. So we have 3 big topics today. So we are going to discuss greenwashing. Dun, 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 dun. We are also going to discuss the safeguards that Julia just mentioned. And finally, youth leadership, which is, of course, a very important topic for us today. If I can have the slides again, please. Okay.
Might be useful to just have Julia up on.
Yes.
Because
Okay. Actually, maybe it could be nice to have them. Sorry. Changing things on the spot. Okay, yeah, so we can see their faces. It's better seeing humans than slides. I think we can all agree at this point. So we will start with our discussion on greenwashing. So the first time that I researched online about the concept of nature-based solutions, I didn't know what it was. The first page I saw was a page on Shell's website. And to be totally fair, it was Bing which is a very bad browser. Like, it's a very, very bad search engine. But still, it was Shell's website, and I was a little bit doubtful of this concept, and I was thinking, this is a bit weird. And many of us, we have been talking for some years at this point about greenwashing, which means when organizations and corporations, states, they also can do that, they say they engage with sustainability without actually changing their practices. And nature-based solutions is a very nice concept because we have the space to communicate to people about it. It's more or less loose, and many people understand right away what we mean, but it can also be dangerous because it can include things that are not really nice. For example, monoculture, tree planting, and all this type of stuff. So I have a question for my panelists now. Why do you think nature-based solutions are so vulnerable to greenwashing? Is there an issue at all, or?
Julia, do you want to start us off? Oh my gosh.
Oh, you can go ahead. I can take over later.
Sure. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. Nature-based solutions, both the strength and I think the weakness of this idea is how broad it is. It's a boundary term, really. It's this like ambiguous, broad term that is easy enough to communicate, to bring people in, which is great. Like, we want to be able to have conversations across silos and across disciplines. We want to bring nature and climate discussions together in the same room. Like, this is the goal. But that also means that maybe bad faith actors or those that maybe aren't as committed to systems change or to meaningfully shifting the status quo can also latch on to this idea because it's so broad and because it's so ambiguous, and they can make it fit their own agenda. And in that way are kind of like, you could say, co-opting or taking advantage of the increased momentum and the popularity and the sort of trendiness of this topic, and make themselves have the appearance that they want, while still servicing their own agenda that maybe is not committed to transformative change, and maybe benefits from the status quo of extraction and of fossil fuel production, for example, or of inequality. So this is tricky, right? Because we want to be able to communicate these ideas, but when you have, oh my gosh, my thing is falling. Hold on. Okay. When you have terms that are this ambiguous, it becomes vulnerable to like co-option and to therefore like greenwashing. And this isn't, nature-based solutions isn't the only term that has suffered from this. This isn't like a unique thing. We've seen this with ideas like sustainability, for example, or even like resilience, other broad, ambiguous ideas that are very powerful because they're ambiguous, but therefore also can be dangerous, or very vulnerable, as we were saying, to misuse and to co-option. So those are sort of some of my beginning thoughts about why a term like NBS is so vulnerable to something like this.
If I'm allowed, I would like to challenge the panel a little bit, if that's okay. Challenging questions. This is not scripted, so I hope it's not going to be too hard.
Challenge
on
me.
you. But basically, a similar effect also happens to the term greenwashing. So many times we can use greenwashing to call out anything, and there are some people accusing us of this, of calling out anything that is not perfect, or and trying to seek for a perfection that could not exist. So I want to ask you, is this a danger also on the side of critiques to nature-based solutions, or do you see this expressed in the statement in some way, or how is this being mobilized by youth that reply to the survey?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think it's tough, and I think that as much as it's really useful and good to have concepts that can cross boundaries and that can bring people together, we also need to meet people where they're at, and have specific conversations with specific groups of people sometimes, because not everybody is the same and not everybody is coming from the same place. So I think, like, what one person might like understand as nature-based solutions or as greenwashing, another person won't, which is why I think it's really important that within the statement we're calling for more specificity and specifically like legally recognized definitions if a term like nature-based solutions is going to be used in policy. And I think that's the real difference here, because if we're just using nature-based solutions as a communication idea or as a communication term or as an education term, that's one thing. But if we're writing it down in policy, if governments are using that term in funding commitments, if major corporations are integrating that into their plans and into their sustainability or climate action goals, then it becomes a different thing, because now this term becomes a lot more powerful in those contexts. And if there is no like meaning or definition, governments and major corporations can just plaster it wherever they want to service their own agendas potentially, which might not necessarily be for the benefit of transformative change, which might not necessarily be for the benefit of justice. So I think there's context is everything, I think, and the people who are talking and using this term, like that matters. And the ways that folks are using this term, that matters, because ultimately language is incredibly powerful. So where we're using it and how we're using phrases like nature-based solutions, it really does matter.
Thank you. This was great answer to my difficult question. This was great, Marina. And it's not because we are co-workers, but I think you went really well. I have another question, and then maybe we can move to the audience after this. So I'm wondering, in which ways do you think youth can contribute to avoid greenwashing in relation to nature-based solutions? So what can we bring as youth to the table?
Julia, do you want to take this one since I have monopolized the speaking a little bit?
Yeah, I want to go back to what you were talking before. I think it's really key to acknowledge that, yes, there is greenwashing in nature-based solutions, but the key, you said, Marina, is like to be understandable and acknowledging that not everyone has the same knowledge and the same experience within nature and climate. And sometimes even people trying to do the good using nature-based solutions the greatest way they can, despite the lack of boundaries, the lack of bindings, the lack of guidelines and safeguards. They're trying to do the good, but sometimes they just don't have the scientific and indigenous knowledge to correctly implement nature-based solutions. Sometimes they don't have the opportunity to have the leadership to create nature-based solutions that is completely that we can call basically nature-based solutions, not because they're trying to on purpose do some greenwashing, but because they just cannot, they've not provided enough resources, enough knowledge to simply do what is right. And that's why we also need this change, and we need to share and to be here and to provide young people some tools, as we're doing right now, as other organizations are doing, to make sure that everyone is on board, everyone is going in the right direction, and is fitted in what is needed, especially fitted locally and local knowledge. Then to go back to what Teresa, you were asking me, it's a bit tricky. I think I'm not sure exactly. I think I've heard a bit of your question, but anyway, I'm going to go to it. What I wanted to do is that I think we also need transparency in nature-based solutions, and transparency leads to accountability, and the other way around. Accountability leads to more transparency in everything. And this is how we can avoid doing greenwashing and misuse and only using nature-based solutions, for instance, as a carbon offsetting tool, like many orgs and many businesses and many governments are seeing nature-based solutions right now, because everyone is talking about climate change and how carbon is the reason of climate change without understanding all GHG emissions, etc. So nature-based solutions perspective around climate and carbon offsetting is like nature-based solutions is the key to sequestrate carbon without considering all the biodiversity integrity around it. I'm not sure I answered right your last question, Raisa. Maybe you can re-ask it.
I think you went really well, Julia. It was a difficult question with no preparation. So this was great. And by the way, Julia has 2 bachelors in history and biology, and I think this is awesome. And I wanted to tell everyone here in person and also digitally who is following us. And also answering to my own question, because why not? I think we as young people, we are going to live in this planet. And it's in our best interest that we are going to have a future and a livable planet. So we want to make sure that actions are actually sustainable. So now I would love to hear from our audience. And if you have questions to our... Yes, I already see 2 people. That's great. So you can come here so everyone can see you, which is going to be great. Both this side. Okay, great.
So... Yeah, so it's nice to see you again, Gracia and Myrna. It's Adrian, if you remember me. GYBN crowd. So my question to you, though, is, and Gracia and Myrna and I have had this discussion before. I don't see NBS as ambiguous. I think the definition is in the name, right? So you mentioned greenwashing. What are the difficult question here is, what are the protocols that you'd like to see to prevent greenwashing, literally? Because we've had this, Gracia and I have had this discussion over years, right? And the second question is, what are the practical support that you're looking for in terms of resources that you'd like to see well-defined? As a GYB and alumni board member, one of the old folks now. Yeah, they kicked me out because I got old. But because we've been having this argument for the last 4 or 5 years since I've been working with GYBN, what are the practical resources that young people need? Define those for me, because I think those are what needs to be defined.
Thank you for these questions. If I can, I will transfer your last question to the third part, because we are just going to discuss youth leadership. And this is going to be a main point for us, how you can support youth leadership in nature-based solutions. But would you like to?
No, I just wanted to say, just wait a bit, because we're talking about safeguards in a moment. So I think this will respond to your question. So, yeah.
So for the first question, you want to know how, in practice, we can implement protocols that would avoid greenwashing. Is that right? Great. So who would like to answer? No one.
No, never. I think we can maybe move to the safeguards, because I think it's going to kind of answer this question.
Yes, maybe we can answer on the next part of the discussion, if that's okay. Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, very good.
Hi, can you hear me? I hope. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you for this panel. It's really interesting. I was wondering about labeling approaches, because just some background, I'm working on sustainable AI, and I see a lot of research done on labeling and labeling certain AI algorithms, for example, as sustainable. So what are your thoughts on labels being able to counter greenwashing? Because I'm skeptical about it.
Yeah, I'm skeptical about it too. Who's doing the labeling?
Just so everyone can hear me. Usually it's university studies being done, and then of course there's supposed to be institutions in general that give out the labels. But of course there's also private labels, and what I worry about is of course that that we as consumers are not able to tell the two apart, which ones are funded privately and which ones are not. But yeah.
Yeah, and then if you can't tell them apart, and maybe one is less trustworthy than the other, then the whole concept of a label kind of loses its level of trust, right? Or it loses a little bit of integrity. Like if you don't understand what a label means, or who put that label there and why, and who they were funded by, and what their maybe agendas might be, if it's private or if it's not, then that label kind of loses meaning. Or could itself be like an example of greenwashing? Like, oh, plopped a little label on it. That was privately funded. So like that's tricky. Especially we had to put together an info brief about nature-based solutions because we felt like even this term was like my master's degree is on nature-based solutions, and I still feel like there's so much about this idea and this concept and this discussion that I don't know. So it can be really opaque, especially I think for young people to feel like they have access to the resources that they need in order to actually meaningfully engage in this discussion. So if the idea of labels, I feel like kind of aligns with that trouble as well a little bit. Like if you don't have if you don't have the background, if you don't do the research to understand like what this label means, then it kind of loses its purpose. So it kind of, I think it really depends on who's regulating and who's making the decisions about that in order to like. And I don't think there is such thing as a one size fits all sort of answer to like this is going to solve greenwashing. So even like a label couldn't be that. But if it's going to be part of a toolbox of approaches to really meaningfully address greenwashing, like all that sort of access to education and information also needs to be there, I would say. You put your hand up though. Yeah.
And that's why we need social scientists in the world.
Thanks for the interesting discussion. I wonder whether part of the issue is that nature-based solutions is being sort of almost entirely conflated with offsetting. And maybe the ambiguity comes in when you're asking nature-based solution to what? Because it's not always to climate change. Sometimes it's to water quality or to coastal protection. And I think that in a world where, we desperately need investment into, the recovery of nature, I guess my question at the heart of it is if Shell did very large scale, very good quality ecological restoration, would you support that and be able to take and spread the lessons from it? Or can we somehow stop it from being a zero-sum game where it's like, well, you're doing this in order to not do that? I don't know.
I'll jump in. One of the dominant narratives that young people perceive from the NBS discussion, this is what we discovered in our survey, was that nature-based solutions overemphasizes, or the narrative around nature-based solutions, the discussion around nature-based solutions overemphasizes carbon sequestration. It overemphasizes mitigation, climate mitigation. It overemphasizes a focus on carbon and offsets, especially. And that's really dangerous. For a multitude of reasons. One, of course, being nature cannot be an offset to climate crisis because if we don't immediately reduce and eliminate fossil fuel emissions, all the trees in the world are not going to help us. Nature loses its ability to be a carbon sink effectively as temperatures continue to rise, as we continue to increase emissions. So I think there's an issue there. I think there's also a problem when the folks that we're hearing from most in the nature-based solutions discussion are folks like Shell, who, to be frank, we have no reason to trust anything that they say. Young people, at least, I would say, that's just to not speak for too many people outside of me, but I feel like what I hear from young people and what I feel as a young person is that I have no reason. Shell has never given me any reason to trust anything that they say. They've never shown any intention of meaningfully committing to systems change or to transformation, to meaningfully scaling down their operations, and to meaningfully committing to reparations for all of the loss and damage and loss of cultures and loss of lives and loss of species and ecosystems that they have directly contributed to. So why should I trust their ecological restoration goals? And then I think you also have to look at it as a whole as well. If Shell's we're committing X billion dollars to ecological restoration, and maybe that ecological restoration is really good and is done really well, but then that's a fraction of a percent of the money that they're committing to oil and gas extraction. Does that ecological restoration matter? I mean, yes, it does in that one place for that ecosystem. But on the grand scheme of things, if we're continuing to increase our extraction of fossil fuels, that harms nature. So that ecological restoration will be threatened by all the other investment that they're putting towards fossil fuel extraction and towards the continued destruction of nature, of peoples, and of cultures because of that work. So I don't know if that's a really succinct, nice answer to your question, but I guess I just find it very, very hard to trust anything that someone like Shell says when it comes to nature-based solutions. And I think because of that, their participation in the discussion is eroding any kind of credibility that nature-based solutions can have.
Thank you, Marina. We have time for one very quick question, and I see there's someone who would like to ask
Can
this
I
question.
answer to this question as well?
Yes, Julia,
yes.
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that our statement is really clear on that. Nature-based solutions are not an excuse to delay any decarbonization and to delay any changes in our current system. Even if Shell is doing great thing with many transparencies and grounded in science, etc., doing something, as Marina said, somewhere in the world that is mainly about poor people, always like wrong on poor people, polluting, extracting fossil fuels or whatever they're doing. If at the same time they're flagging the fact that they're restoring nature, then no, it's not a question of balance. It's a question of globally acting to change the global system. We cannot look at the details. We really need to look at how globally the system is working. And in the case of Shell, if they're doing minor steps as an excuse to not change the way they're doing and the way they're working, it's not going to work. And then overall, Shell is doing greenwashing, even though their local action is not greenwashing and cannot be labeled as greenwashing. And to go back on the label question, to make sure that the label is great, again, we're getting back to the transparency and accountability idea. We need to ask ourselves, is there any clear indicators that says, first, the state we are, and then the state we expect to go, with great indicators grounded in science, grounded in indigenous and local knowledge? If all these questions or answers are no, then you're not taking into account the environmental, social, and climate parts of all of this, and also economic part, because nature-based solutions right now has lots of economic parts that are really highlighted. There is big potential for a good economy, but right now it's not going the right direction, but it's something else. So I think now we can jump on another question on the next part on biodiversity safeguards. I'll let Regista try.
Thank you, Julia, for also bringing back this statement, because it's important that you realize that we are not talking here on behalf of ourselves personally, but these are the voices of more than 1,000 young people of more than 100 countries. So thank you, Julia, for that. And now we have some time for a very quick question before we go to the safeguard part, which we are talking a little bit about now, but yeah, go ahead.
It's short, I promise, and it kind of goes into this, but I work for an environmental NGO, and a lot of environmental NGOs and conservation charities often have corporate sponsors and partners working with them. For instance, WWF is working with Reckitt and I wrote it down, Sky Zero, for promoting nature-based solutions. And kind of to avoid greenwashing, what types of partnerships would youth leaders and policymakers like to see from environmental NGOs like us?
Oh, I love this question. I feel like I've been monopolizing a lot of the panel though, so I want to see if anybody else has an answer to this before I say anything.
Maybe my quick answer would be the kind of partnership I want to see is just sharing our knowledge and experiences and making sure that every person has a say and he's heard and he's listened to when we're in this case. NGOs usually are working locally and they have the local knowledge working with local people. Usually, especially many NGOs are locally led by communities and led by people on the ground. They have the knowledge. And on the other hand, us as youth global organizations, we can bring other solutions from other sides of the world. We can bring our expertise as youth people. We can also just bring our curiosity and learn from what organization has to bring to us in partnership. So this is one of the answers of the question, like one side of the answer, but I feel like everyone has a place and everyone has something to share and to bring to the table equally, especially and horizontally.
Maybe something that I can add as well, thank you, Julia, it's that sometimes we get into a very complicated situation when these companies, super huge, have a lot of funding and then they want to do their bit. And then you are in a situation where you can really do it. So I'm going to tell quickly a personal experience. One super huge company that we all drink this black soda from wanted to fund a project in very close to my hometown to restore the river soil, like you have to kind of ground the soil so the river doesn't wash up all the nutrients from the soil. So we try to get the funding because their proposal was really not gonna do any benefit on the ground. So I think there are some times that you really like, if you're in a good position to make that money really matters on the ground, maybe you should fight the battle and really make that money is counting to transform in a really like important way on the ground. You have to be aware that you will be battling a lot of bureaucracy and processes and blah, blah. But I think it's important that we are ready to fight for that and take that thing to really make changes and propose things that they are not able to see because they don't have time or whatever reason, right? So I think we should also take the chance.
Thank you for this. I think the money is the big question that all of us are kind of facing. And I think we should definitely talk about this. I would also like to welcome Kathy, who just joined us from Yongo. And I think she came at the right time because we are going to start now the discussion on safeguards. So safeguards are mechanisms and tools that we use in nature-based solutions or in any other projects to avoid potential harm and potential threats. And I feel we are discussing this a little bit already. And we also had a very good question from the audience, which I'm going to steal. So my question to the panel is, what kind of mechanisms and tools did the survey indicate or that you think that could be good to ensure that nature-based solutions are sustainable, regenerative, and good for communities?
Myrna, I think we're going to pass this one to you.
Can you hear us, Mirna?
Yes, I can hear you.
Maybe
I can hear you.
I can give just a little bit of background from the survey. So just for you guys to let you know, like around 60% of the people that answered the survey, thanks, they really think that there is a huge lack of safeguards, and that it is really important that whatever safeguards we manage to establish, they should be legally binding. Because I mean, the topic what we're talking about is so broad, and anyone can use it right now as the way they need and the way they like. So they should be like guidelines to like really like kind of start establishing these measures that you were saying. So I think this is going to answer your question. So go ahead, Mirna.
Thank you so much, Grecia. And yes, first to introduce, what Raisa said about safeguards, it's the correct definition. Maybe it's a way to remember it quickly is just safeguards are tools to prevent that you don't do harm, so you don't do bad, and ensure the benefits that is too good. It is very complicated still, but at least safeguards are legal mechanisms. So in a way, they can be binding. And that is the difference between safeguards and other kinds of approaches. For example, voluntary commitments or standards or even labeling that could be interesting, but we all have heard already that we are a bit skeptical about this kind of approaches because they have shown us that they don't really work and they don't ensure the things that should be ensured for the people and for nature, biodiversity and climate. So we have actually asked the question to our survey respondents about how they think that nature-based solutions should be implemented. And we gave them the options like legally binding safeguards, like global legally binding safeguards, or nationally developed legally binding safeguards, or voluntary commitments, or other kinds of approaches. And we had more than 50%, 63% of our respondents, which is a big majority, say that they want nature-based solutions to be implemented through legally binding safeguards, either at the global or a national level. But still, they want this kind of approach. I think that it makes a lot of sense because, to be honest, young people, we are sick of these false promises. Like we don't buy it anymore when we have this a company that says, oh yes, we are going to offset your emissions by planting trees in this place. We don't believe in that anymore because we see how they really they are bribing us. They are not really keeping to their promise. They are saying a lot of good things, and they are saying that they are being really green, but they are not. And we have we have seen how the failure of a lot of environmental frameworks that didn't really work. And for example, RED, it's not like we are comparing RED to nature-based solutions. These are different frameworks. But RED, the discussion of RED started in 2005. And in 2007, we had RED acknowledged under the UNFCCC and already funding and projects implementing RED. And we had a lot of RED projects that didn't care about indigenous peoples and local communities, didn't care about biodiversity. They only cared about carbon sequestration, carbon absorbing. So we had actually gold camps that were accredited as red projects because they had a special type of grass that would store a lot of carbon. And we had indigenous peoples and local communities protecting their forests, and they couldn't apply to red because they didn't comply with all the requirement criteria that it was very complicated to acknowledge, like to make the checks. So after that, there was a lot of criticism, and at the end, they developed safeguards for red plus in 2010. So we had like 5 years of bad implementation of red already before the safeguards came in. They don't ensure implementation anyway because like it all depends on how they are going to be monitored and how civil society are going to say, hey, you're not really complying with the safeguards. But at least now we have a legal tool to say which things should be ensured. Among the red safeguards, we have the protection of traditional knowledge, the full and effective participation of all the relevant stakeholders, and the conservation of biodiversity and the natural forests. That is huge, and that should have been said in the beginning. So that is what we want with nature-based solutions. We don't want nature-based solutions to come like super last minute into the UNFCCC and the CBD. We don't have like the term and the commitment and the definition in the glossary, and that's it. And then like 5 years after, after 5 years of bad implementation, we will develop safeguards because this really didn't work. We don't have the time. We are really running out of time, and we need the best possible framework to be adopted soon in the CBD and the UNFCCC, because as Marina says, if this is going to be into the policy, if governments are going to be encouraged to implement the nature-based solutions, then we need to ensure that certain benefits are going to be protected and certain risks are going to be avoided. Among the benefits that we want to be protected are biodiversity protection. That has been like the biggest claim from our youth communities, like more than 50-70%, like the most voted option has been biodiversity protection. And then climate mitigation and climate adaptation, and then the rights of indigenous peoples, local communities, a free, prior, and informed consent of these communities before implementing nature-based solutions. The risks that should be avoided by these safeguards, according to the respondents of our survey, are first, the loss of ecosystem integrity, structure, and functions, with more than 54%. Then polluters using nature as a greenwashing tool, more than 50%, 51 say that we want safeguards to avoid that polluters use this as a greenwashing tool. And then the transition of forests and other ecosystems into monoculture plantations, the lack of minimum participation of local communities and indigenous peoples, commodification of nature, and land grabbing and other impacts to human and indigenous rights. So these are the responses from our survey. This is not something that we made between this group of people that you see like in front of you, but these are the responses of more than 1,000 young people that responded to the survey.
Thank you, Mirna. This is great. So basically, in a nutshell, we cannot use nature to keep living like we are living today. It's not going to save us if we don't change radically and systematically how we live. So now I'm going to transfer for one quick question from the audience on safeguards. So if any, okay, you want to ask something? Okay, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm a team member at Youth for Nature, and I just wanted to comment something on sponsorship that you're asking. Money comes from two sides, right? It's either aid from the government, or it's funded by billionaires around the world. And why do billionaires have the money? Is because they sell more things than other people, and so they make more money. And so if we're gonna end that, then you're asking to end capitalism. So that's the problem there. You know, we can't switch our funding sources from poorer countries or poorer companies. It doesn't work. The people who are funding like Microsoft and Amazon, Jeff Bezos, they're all capitalist winners, you know? So it's not us the problem or choosing the sponsors that are wrong. Everybody in the environmental community is doing that. My question to you guys is that if we get those protocols and those guidelines there, if we incorporate them into the NDCs and the UNFCCC and the COP CBD and all of these other summits, we're essentially asking governments to implement them the right way. But how are we asking corporations to implement them the right way? Because governments can only aid with fiscal policies. But at the end of the day, corporations will only be as sustainable as to the degree where it doesn't touch the earnings of their company. We know all the companies, they will do whatever it takes to be sustainable, but once that means reducing the size of money in their pocket, they won't do it. And so you can't ask Shell to implement nature-based solutions in a right way or ask them to reduce their emissions, because that means reducing how much they're selling fossil fuels. So how do you make corporations do that? That's my question.
Do you mean end capitalism? Is that your question? Please go ahead, speakers.
And hi, everyone. Just first to say hi, I'm Kathy from Youngle and Gibbon a little bit, but that is our Gibbon expert there. So I guess just briefly, probably my view is not very sharp because I also work in private finance, a little fun fact. But my opinion is that, of course, corporates are not just monsters, of course. It's made by employees and people, of course. And I guess a really driven point, especially today and in the days to come, is the pressure from civil society stakeholders and also what we want. At the end of the day, that's how they make profit over a longer term. So, I mean, if corporates are smart enough, they would realize, for example, suppliers of this furniture, if they actually realize how important it is to make sure maybe they'll still be as profitable as they are today, if they're still as dominant as they are today, maybe in 50 years and in 70 years, they would listen to the voices of consumers and the voices of future consumers especially, and to really see how that might work out well. And especially that, overconsumption over a longer term also doesn't do much good for corporates. But again, they are corporates who are not aware of this, and of course is and also governments can also pressure the corporates, from one side, and including the safeguards, which indirectly also pressures the corporates. So I guess mainly just two sides. One is the pressure from governments, and one side is pressure from society stakeholders. And of course, maybe some corporates just have pressure from themselves as well. But again, we definitely cannot 100% rely on that. So yeah, this is my view. Not very sharp. So Marina, do you want to go next? Or yes.
So very quickly, just to complement what you were saying, I think a lot of companies want to go green, want to do good for the environment, but they don't know how. And I think this is something that really involves everyone here. If we know how to do it, I think it's kind of the responsibility of us to really tell them, don't worry, give me and I'll do that good thing. And I think it's really important that we are really knowledgeable and that we know what we're doing on the ground, because they really need us if you think it around, no? And every time the social pressure is bigger and bigger.
Thank you for this. Would you like to say something?
Maybe quickly. I was going to say that since he was talking about how these corporations are going to do what they're going to do, irrespective of government, I was thinking that is why probably we need some of these standards. If you really want to implement a nature-based, initiative cleanly, without hiding anything, then you should be able to submit yourself to some standard, a standard that has been made very transparent, that people can trust, and you could submit to the standard. And then we know that, yes, everything you're doing is being transparent and all. Otherwise, if you skip that standard, then we know that you probably are hiding something and you don't want us to know, because most likely they would want to do this to, cover up their emissions somewhere and all that. But if you are willing to do this openly, we think if we have these open standards, these are one of the things that could actually help for us to check and keep these private companies, under surveillance.
Thank you a lot for your contribution. I think we are ready to move to the next part. I would just like to...
Maybe if I can add something very quickly.
Yeah, let me go. Yeah, very quickly. Go on.
Very quickly, 2 points. One, if we have legally binding and universally agreed definitions for nature-based solutions, then if private companies are doing something that doesn't comply with this, then they should not call it nature-based solutions. They should call it something else, but not nature-based solutions if we have this. And another point is that we don't need the private sector to be encouraged to do good things. We need them to be regulated. And the global multilateral agreements are being too soft on the private sector, and we need stronger approaches.
Thank you. This was a great contribution. And also we should remind ourselves that private money also comes from the public sector. And this is something that many economists and social movements have been saying: tax evasion, public investment in research that generates profits for the private sector. So this private money is also very much public. So now maybe we can move to the next point, which is youth leadership. Great. We are very excited for this. I see one person cheering who is also from our team. So we had a very good question from our audience, and I'm going to start with it. And what does youth need? So what types of practical resources and tools can people in our digital audience contribute for inclusive nature-based solutions and good nature-based solutions?
Yeah, sure. Just, I guess 3-4 main points. One is, of course, training. One is finance, always a key topic. And then one is, of course, capacity building, which is also relates to training. And also, very importantly, is empowerment. So to start with, in terms of training and capacity building, of course, youth, when they were born, they're children. But again, Youngo is the youth constituency, but we're also accepting anyone under the age of 35. So maybe if they were just born for 10 days and they want to register, they can also join us. But so, of course, the first step would be to train them and then to, make sure we give them the sufficient amount of knowledge of what is, for example, nature-based solutions and what is climate change broadly. And that is definitely the first step. And so far we've seen from public education, private education, and also in terms of resources, on the internet, it is not very sufficient and also sometimes not mandatory. So yeah, that is definitely step one, is to give youth the opportunity and to receive those training, especially in many global south countries and in many least developed and most affected areas, and peoples don't really have the resources and don't really have the access to training and to have the understanding of these very critical areas. And two, of course, is finance, is when they have sufficient knowledge, when they have sufficient training, and then they maybe start their own project, but then they reach this challenge of finance, of course, especially for our Global South colleagues and for the MAPA colleagues. And of course, myself actually also follow the UNFCCC financial mechanism. And I think in their last meeting back in September, I asked a question about youth access to climate finance, and I think the answer back then is it is very challenging. For example, it's already challenging now for civil society stakeholders, for CSOs to reach the funding criteria of GCF and GEF, which are the two operating entities of the financial mechanism. And you can imagine how challenging it is for youth to access and for youth-led projects to meet these criteria. So this is indeed a really huge challenge. And I guess, so far there is definitely no perfect solution, but what we're trying to do is to advocate for national governments to sort of set up small grants and small funds for youth to, youth who have really amazing ideas to grow their projects from an initial stage to a stage that can reach the funding criteria of these funding agencies and institutions. And so I think the funding is definitely important, not only public funding, but also private funding. And of course, we know that many corporates, especially the ones who have integrity, have set up foundations who also provide very small amount of funding. But of course, it's far, far not enough to what we need, in terms of reaching a world living in harmony with nature or reaching our 2030, 2050 goals. So of course, indeed, more should be done from both public sector and the private sector. And last but not the least, of course, is to give youth an actual seat at the decision-making table, which is exactly what Secretary General Guterres said to us, Youngo, last weekend. And I've been quoting this sentence for quite a few times in the past few days in various events, but this is such an amazing sentence, and it's exactly what we need, is to have a real seat at the decision-making table, and of course to actually participate, to be consulted with, and to provide ideas from decision-making processes like COP26 and to national and also regional, of course, regional, national, subnational, and local level implementation as well. So these are all critical areas, and there is no way we can be, truly because at the end of the day, youth are the future. So if we are to reach our goals, then we must have these in mind. And of course, we must be included, consulted, and provided with sufficient resource, including finance. Thanks.
Thank you. We are the future and we are the present, basically. So thank you a lot. I wonder if any other panelists would like to compliment. Maybe one that it's being live. Oh, okay. Go ahead, Abraham.
Yeah, so I think I'll end where I'll start where Kati ended actually when she talked about the youth needing to be at the table, right? I was speaking at a panel during COI, and a director from WMO was saying, young people, you're asking to be at the table, but I would challenge you to come with something to the table. And I think that is why I'm proud of, this coalition, because we are not just asking, to be at the table. We come with this to the table, right? We say that we have this. We are not just saying that do something about nature-based solutions. We have found out what should be done about nature-based solutions from a youth perspective, and that is what we are bringing to start that discussion. And most importantly, we have young people doing amazing stuff all around the world, right? Like myself, no. I see myself to be privileged, because I am from Africa, but I happen to be educated. I have been to be part of a few people who is studying a PhD. How many young people at my age, have this opportunity, even to be able to come to Scotland for COP, right, and COI, and with a party. Okay, but there are young people where I come from who are doing amazing things, and some of them who are suffering seriously from the impacts of climate change. I can give one quick example. I'm working on a project with a professor in University of Regina on women, in farming, and there's a category of young wives. So these young girls who quickly after school they just get into marriage. They don't go forward with education. And this was a section of women we were looking at. And this lady who unfortunately lost her young husband very early, still had to now farm for herself, And unfortunately, because it's a family land, she'd been given a very bad portion of the land where when it rains, the water actually passes. It's the waterway. So this lady has to come up with this ingenious method of planting rice upstream, so that when the water is coming, the rice farm actually, soaks up the water and gradually, releases the water to her groundnuts and to her millet farm. And when I heard of this story, I was like, I need to go talk to her. Unfortunately, when I started my interviews, by the third day when I got there had been a heavy rain the previous day. And when I got there, this thing that I thought was a brilliant nature-based solution, idea that she was using to protect her farm, when I went there that day, the rains from the previous day had cleared everything, from the rice to the millet to everything. And I went there and I couldn't even have that interview, because when I was speaking to her and she was speaking about the farm, like tears were dropping. And these are the things we are talking about. Corporations and people can say, oh, we have nature-based solutions, it's going to be the next thing. But is it really going to solve the climate crisis? We need to make sure that we don't use these terms to just overshadow, our responsibilities. And also, we need to know that these guys are doing amazing things there and need support. If she had some little support in, backing up this amazing nature-based solutions that she had come up with, it probably would have helped her to be able to go through this farming season. And these are the supports that are needed, right? Young people are doing things in different areas differently, and support to young people have to be need-based. They need to be bespoke. A young person in Europe would not, or in Africa, would not need the same thing that the young person in Europe needs. We need to start addressing young people not as a homogeneous, group, but actually groups that are different and need different needs. I think I've spoken too much. Thank you.
You've spoken perfectly. This is really well. Does anyone have anything to add? I have a question from the audience, but really, that's it. Yes.
Hi. Can you hear me? Yeah. I'm from 2050 Climate Group. It's Scotland's youth climate charity, and we educate and empower young people to take action on climate change. And just wanted to ask, in your experience, what is the best way for the youth to influence companies that they work with from within, but also companies that they engage with as consumers on nature-based solutions?
Very big and challenging question, so I love it.
Anyone want to take?
Sorry, I didn't get the question well.
She was asking, as young people, how can we influence either from inside a company or either as a consumer? So this was the question.
Sounds like a question for me. so yeah, I guess inside the company, and from my personal experience, I was interning at an American investment bank in the summer, and it's really surprisingly that although that there are many critical voices from the outside, people within the firm, it is a very large bank. People within the firm, for example, people who are engineers, people who are works in operations, they start to build this sustainability network who actually have very regular like webinars and everything to really share what climate change mean for all the employees. And of course, at an initial stage, it starts with how to reduce your personal plastic waste, but it's really trying to push the firm forward. And of course, these are little steps. And of course, the firm, in my personal opinion, is as large investment banks, they are responsible for much more than what they committed. But of course, these are little steps from internal perspective view, and for consumers, of course, consumer voices really matter, and especially for I do love the consumer industry, and I think from the little things that I know that they do care a lot about the voices of consumers, because at the end of the day, that is what built them, what made them, where they are today. And I feel like companies, for example, like the ones who are, you've probably seen their events at COP, and I feel like those are, of course, there might be events who they just put it on for just to be an event, but then there are really ones who are really passionate in hearing the voices, especially the voices of youth. For example, a few private sector companies, President Koi also have their youth advisory board, and they intentionally not to make it public, but to really build this relationship with youth. And also, of course, I guess a few of us and also our friends might be part of those groups, and we've heard a lot about how they actually provide so much resources to the youth without making that a public marketing thing, and also to really get them to know what the firm is doing, and also to really want to hear from them what they can improve. And I really agree with what my fellow panelists have said. As really importantly, is companies sometimes they want to do great things, but they don't really know where to start with, or they don't really know what are the challenges and where are the needs. So that is my personal perspective. Who wants to go next?
Thank you, Kathy.
I think, Kathy, you're right, but I'm tempted to say that this opinion probably is more of what is happening here in the global north. In the global south, most of these companies don't care about sustainability. They do not implement all those sustainability policies and structures that they showcase to you guys here. They don't do them in Africa, in my country, in the global south. They pollute, and nobody holds them accountable because our governments actually do not really even have time to talk about those things. They are more focused on providing the basic necessities, the food, the healthcare, those infrastructure. And these companies lie to you guys here that they are doing all these things, but back home, back in the global south, they don't do these things. And that is just so true. We did a waste audit recently. My organization, Green Africa Youth Organization, we did an audit, right? And we went to the beach, took all the, plastics and bottles, and it's amazing if you see the number of companies, foreign companies and all these bottles there, and none of them have any serious, recycling or buyback or whatever policy where we come from. And that is the truth, right? So they might be telling you guys that they have all these structures and they care about this, but I'm telling you it's here, right? And not there. And over there, that is where a lot of the pollution is happening. And I think that is one of the discussions that we need to do. Encourage young people in the global south also start reporting on these things. I think they have changed here because you guys have been complaining, reporting, right? How do we create such opportunities for us to also report these things, to keep them under the microscope, like, keep watch on them, right? Report that, hey, I don't want to mention any name, but hey, company X is polluting this much in this country. Company Z is doing this much in this country. How do we hold them accountable? We need to work with you here because most of the time their HQs are here, and we need to work with young people here and, private civil society organizations here to hold them accountable because they are doing that here, but at certain places they are hiding their bad, activities and practices.
Thank you. I think I will just add something more quickly. And I have a company, I study business, it's a sustainable company, I do sustainable tourism, don't think I pollute. But I think mostly you should focus on the costs. Since any company always wants to low down its costs in any way, like even the payment they do to the employees or the staff, or either the processes or in the logistics. So we need to start learning their language. That's important because otherwise you will be the nerdy person that they will not look at. And the second thing is you really need to know how to learn, to read numbers and try to find a way to low down the costs. And then they will give you this girl has a good idea. Maybe we should put attention on whatever green thing she's doing. And then it's gonna make us look great. I think it's a cost matter and really learning their language, basically. Yeah.
So I love this because we have three very different opinions, and this is precisely why we need to have young people and diversity in panels, because this is what happens, and this is great. Somehow I feel we could have an entire session only on engagement with the private sector. So Emily, do you think you can find us a spot, perhaps? Emily is in charge of this pavilion that we are talking right now, we are speaking right now, so this could be really fun. So yes, I think now we can move to our next part, which is the call to action and the next steps. As we are, like I said, solutions oriented, we would like to invite you all to engage with. Marina, you can go.
Yeah. Before we run away, let's chat about what happens next. So we have this statement. It's launched. It's live on our website. Yay. That's so exciting.
Marina, does this mean that people can share on social media? Because there were some people asking and I was kind of forbidding because to not spoil the surprise. So now it's allowed.
It's allowed now. So there's a couple copies that we've printed out for folks that are here, for folks that are listening and tuning in digitally. It's up on our website. And for folks that are here in person as well, it's up on our website. And maybe if we can jump to the slides because we can see some stuff. If
Thank you. We can go.
That's you.
Yeah.
But while, perfect. It's still doing the feedback.
I'm hearing myself, and this creeps me out a little bit.
Anyway, I'll just go forward. What next? Now that we have this survey, a couple things. One of the things that we really, really hope from the survey is that young people can use it as a really tangible tool and resource to support them in their advocacy, in their activism, and honestly also in their discussions when they're talking about nature-based solutions. Something that we found as three different groups, and one of the reasons that we kind of internally wanted to do this together was we wanted to be able to talk about nature-based solutions, but we felt like we really wanted the credibility of having a community, our communities of young people sort of backing us when we're and making sure that we're doing justice to their views. So that's why we wanted to put this statement together, and we're hoping that it can really be a useful tool for young people to use when they're talking about nature-based solutions to sort of lean on and to use in their advocacy efforts. To that point, it's now live on our website, and we're looking really for signatures and support to help really bolster the survey, the statement even more. Again, this statement is not just the opinions of our three respective groups. It is coming directly from this consultation survey that we did in 3 different languages that brought together over 1,000 young people from 118 countries. But now we're looking even for more support from young people now that we have the statement and it's published. We're looking for folks to sign on and support. And you can do that on our website, and all of those links will come up on the slides, and I'll share them in a moment. And you don't have to be a young person to show your support for this statement as well. We're looking for intergenerational support for this statement. Some of the things that we're hoping to do in the future, and if folks in the audience or listening online have resources to support us in doing this, please, please, please come let us know. But we're hoping to host community-specific dialogues to go even further than just an online survey, because there's a lot of pros to having online surveys, but also that can be really inaccessible for folks. And while we were able to translate it in 3 languages, That's only 3 languages. There's lots of young people that don't speak either English, Spanish, or French, or maybe don't have the sort of data or internet connectivity to be able to participate in a survey like this. And those youth voices are just as important, if not more important, because many of those are likely on the front lines or in places where so-called nature-based solutions might be taking place. So we really want to be able to make sure that those voices are also brought into this discussion and being really centered. So that's something that we're maybe hoping to do in the future. The survey, we're going to keep the survey open. The statement's going to remain as it is, but in the spirit of bringing together the biodiversity and the climate discussion, we understand that the CBD COP is coming up, or at least the second part of the CBD COP is coming up soon. So we want to keep the survey open and see what happens with the responses, and in recognition of this next CBD COP, which might potentially mean a revision of the statement around the CBD COP. It kind of really depends on what we see from those responses. But based off of the responses that we do have right now and that fed into the statement that many of you in person here are holding in your hands or online, I hope are looking through digitally, we're going to produce a fuller report that digs into some of the demographics and more detailed responses that we got from the questions from the survey, because there are lots of really interesting things in there that didn't make it into the statement, but we want to make sure that we're being transparent about what young people are thinking and saying and feeling and knowing about nature-based solutions. So we're going to be producing that full survey report early in the new year. Yes.
I love the open deadline. What does it mean early? It's like nature-based solutions. It's a bounded concept.
Okay, now.
Okay, so next slide.
Oh, yes. Okay, so for folks that are tuning in digitally and want a really easy way to access the statement right now, there's a little QR code up for you. And also for folks that are here. But we also have some printed QR codes for folks that are on ground as well that you can use. I think the website is www.nbsyouthposition.org. So that's where you'll see all the information. You can also find our info brief up there too, and access to our surveys and detail about the whole project. But you'll see the full statement there, and that's also where you'll see the form to sign on your name and support is on that website. So please do that.
This means that anyone here can support in any capacity. So even if you can do only signing, this is already amazing and super great. So everyone has an opportunity of tangibly supporting youth today.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's take a photo.
Can we bring up our virtual speakers again? We want to take a photo of all the panelists.
Can I just say very quickly a thank you to everyone who is here today? Some people, they were asking me if this was a youth-only type of event, can only young people attend? And I was like, please, no. We want to have as many people as possible because we want a truly intergenerational dialogue. This is what we need. And I would also really like to thank the speakers and the 3 organizations that are involved in this really important work. Nature-based solutions are here to stay, and we wanted to make it as inclusive as possible. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so now we can take a picture.
Yes.
I don't know if it's working, if you can hear me.
Thank you so much, Myrna and Julia. We love you so much.
We love you too.
Bye.
Yeah, thank you. It was amazing. See you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.